In this episode, we are going to be deep diving all things listening to our kids. This is a crucial part of the low demand approach. It is step 3 of 6 in the 6-step method. And so it's right at the centerpiece. It comes directly before we drop demands proactively in the approach, which means that gathering information from our kids, listening deeply to them, collaborating with them, and honoring what they share with us is essential information before we can get around to the business of letting go of things. And so in this episode, I'm going to go through many of my most commonly asked questions about listening to our kids, and we're going to explore all of the nuance around how do we listen to them when what they're sharing is triggering to us? How do we listen to them when they won't answer a single question we ask? How do we listen to them when the information they're sharing is different than what we want to hear or than what we think we were going to hear? All of this matters deeply for how we move through this low demand life. And it's my deep conviction that the listening step of listening to our children is one of the most countercultural and thus deeply healing and transformative pieces of the process. We live in a world that discounts children's voices all the time. Children are just another marginalized group with less power, and thus they're given less dignity, given less autonomy, and given less voice in their own reality. Listening to our kids is a way of pushing back against all of the systems that say that people with more power deserve more voice, that people with more power know better. And in this method, we're going to step back from that and ask, what if our kids know better? What if they truly bring a level of self-knowledge that no one else could replicate? What if we really don't know what it is that's going on inside of their bodies and minds? What if we don't know without inviting their voices in? And from that place of humility, from that place of radical honesty with ourselves, we become the kind of listening partners that our kids desperately need. So let's jump in to the episode. The first question that I'm going to respond to is, how do you listen to your kids when they will not, cannot voluntarily participate in a back and forth question and answer? How do we listen to our kids when they don't want to talk to us? Let's get into it.
We begin to listen to all the things that our kid is telling us in this particular situation. So it's where we synthesize all this work of looking at them with a demand lens, listening to what's before and behind the behaviors. It is shifting the focus from why are you hitting, why can't you just use your words, all of that, to what is it about this situation that's making you so dysregulated in the first place. Generally, to figure out the answer to that question, we need to dig deeper. We need a process of listening, or we need to become demand detectives and put on our note-taking hat and observe really closely, or sometimes engage in back and forth actual conversation. Just going to name it. The temptation is to ask your kid a bunch of questions. Gosh, if I could just sit you down and can we just talk about school? What is it that's actually so hard? Do you not like your teacher? Is it math class? So why is it so hard to get out the door? I would get so frustrated early on in this process as I was learning different techniques and taking workshops and trying to figure out how do we do this. And other teachers or other modalities would just give me all these questions, helpful questions for me to ask my kid. And I was like, dudes, I'm good at questions. If you just had a kid that would just ask questions and get an answer, I would be hitting this thing out of the park. What do you do when you can't ask your kid a question? What do you do when they're never going to tell you why something's so hard or give you an idea for trying it a new way? What do you do then? I felt so frustrated that so much of collaborative parenting relies on adult-driven questions and kid-responsive answers. If it only it was as easy as asking them questions, right? If only. So the beauty of low demand is that your kid never needs to answer a single question. Yes, declarative language is beautiful and it may be transformative for you, but your goal here is not to like master the art of concealing a demand in a different language so that you can still get a response. Because if you're coming to them with a desire to get something from them, no matter how you phrase it, it is likely going to trigger, especially if you have a highly demand sensitive kid, a PDA, or a kid with childhood trauma. So we're going to spend some time here. There's 4 categories of listening to our kids. You can listen to what their behavior is telling you. So that's just purely observation. What can I see on the very outside that's happening? And the other is the things you can observe about their bodies. What are their eyes doing? What are their shoulders doing? What's the speed of their breath, the speed of their movements? It's like all of the very granular information that's coming from their nervous system. Then you can listen to their freely shared communication, I like to call it, just like the stuff they yell at you. There can often be really helpful information in the stuff they yell at you. So you can listen to that. And then there's solicited communication. Solicited communication does not have to happen in real time, back and forth. It can be happening over text. It can be happening through charades. Early on, the only way we could get any back and forth communication was jump if you, or raise your hand if you, or bark like a dog if you, and everybody would answer in our family. So it wasn't even zeroed in on the one kid that I really wanted the answer from. It was one question: bark like a dog if you love cereal. And then everyone who loves cereal barks like a dog. And then I'm like, okay, that's my question for the day. I got one question, and it was bark if you love cereal. And we were just practicing the technique, really. And then we were able to build on that to use bark if you for other things that are maybe trickier, or use whatever your kid likes to do. If they like to flick you off, or use certain curse words, or act like they're pooping, or whatever, like poop if you, or put up your middle finger if you, like, make the solicited communication as friendly to their nervous system as possible, because solicited communication is almost always triggering. As you are opening up this curious question, the goal is to listen to all that your child has to teach you. You're bringing this curious, open, wondering about all the demands that might be present, and this compassionate, respectful lens that says we all do well when we can. So there must be something getting in the way here. And it probably isn't at the level of you don't want to, it's that you can't. So we bring that whole heart posture. We bring that depth of knowing of like, why am I even pursuing this question in the first place? Like, does this even matter? And if it does matter to me, what's all the stuff I'm bringing to it? And if I could let this go, what would that bring into our life? You're doing all of your own inner work around the demand. So you've already started dropping some things, right? Maybe you've dropped the, if I could just control this, like if you would just do what I tell you, then this would all go away. You're setting that mentality on the shelf. You're dropping the urge to force them into the thing, and already beginning to wonder, am I going to let this go? And how am I going to let this go? Is it going to be a big drop where I drop everything about it? Or is it going to be a series of tiny drops? You're already beginning to wonder about that, right? What even matters about this to me? And so again, when we show up to listen to our kids, we're listening to everything they have to tell us. We are willing to be surprised. We are willing for them to say, I can't do it at all. Or this doesn't matter to me, and I'm not on board with shifting it. Like, they have their full humanity, and sometimes they may have things to tell us that we don't want to hear or aren't ready to hear. Listening to our kids, it's brave work. It's important to name that the goal isn't to get at, okay, let's get a tiny bow on this thing so we can get it solved and wrap it up and put it away and move on with our lives. No, listening to our kids it's a radical step. It's the whole thing, really. This process is the whole thing. It's like, having the lens, doing our inner work, showing up in collaboration with our kids, and then letting things go. It's checking in with our needs, and it's coming back together as a family. What are the values that this is creating for us? It's just this flow between lens, inner work, connection, lens, inner work, connection. It's a flow. And the point isn't what exactly they say or what exactly you drop. It's the relationship that it builds. It's the trusting connection that releasing these demands makes space for.
In our next question, I want to offer a reframe that may help those of you who are getting really triggered by being yelled at by your kids. It may play into an old trauma wound that you have around yelling in your childhood home. Or perhaps no one ever expressed big feelings in your childhood home, and so you learned it was really scary and off limits to do that. Or maybe it's just painful to witness your child in pain and you're really struggling. I have found that bringing my curiosity on board in those moments really helps de-escalate all of my activated, all of my triggered parts so that I can really listen and stay connected to my core self and connected to my kid. Basically, by getting curious when they're yelling at me, instead of just what did I do to mess this up or why are we here again, but instead asking what are they telling me, making it an opportunity for more information gathering really, really helps in those moments. So I'm going to get into that question in a lot more depth. I've gotten the most insight by the things that they say and do in crisis. It's so rarely talked about because we write off anything that happens. If you scream it, like how we were raised, I'll listen to you when you say it nicely, kind of thing. If we don't say it in the right way, then nothing that's said can be of value. But man, I have had some life changing insights by listening to what my kid screams at me when they are at total meltdown state where I'm like, that's the key. I didn't know. And now I do. Now I can be a different and better parent. Like, I'll never forget a huge stairway meltdown earlier in the day. I invited them outside to play. It didn't even occur to me that it was a big deal. They were like, no, I don't want to go play. I'm like, okay. And then later on the stairs, I was protecting a younger sibling. And I was like, we don't force people to do things in our family. You can't make them move out of your way or whatever it was. And my kid lost his shit, just like total switch flipped. And he starts screaming, you say we don't force people in our family, but earlier you said, do you want to go outside? And you were forcing me. It was just the most incredible insight that changed everything about the way that we came out of burnout was when I realized that me just popping in the room and saying, hey, do you want to go play outside with us? Was so dysregulating that 6 hours later, it made me very physically unsafe. Just dropping that, no longer would I pop my head in the door and issue a kind of random invitation. That was such a potent demand that I could drop for my child. And that's just one. Like, I probably have, off the top of my head, 5 or 6 game-changing insights that came from meltdowns. So I just want to hold that too, that if you're in a season with so many meltdowns, and I know that this is like the hardest mental shift, but what if this is so much communication that is coming to you? Every day you're getting potent communication about what is too hard. And it's not as easy as that. It's not as simple as that, but it is that too. And sometimes shifting from how do I make this stop, or how do we survive this, or how do I keep us safe, to what am I learning today? Just that can cue more curiosity and compassion and safety within ourselves to move through what the day holds. That genuinely being curious about our kids can be our greatest safety plan. In our third question, I am often asked, how do you talk to your kids about low demand? Let's say you've been parenting a different way up to this point, and now you have gotten a new diagnosis or working with a new therapist, or you're just at a breaking point and you're like, this isn't working anymore. I want to try something new. How do you tell your kids, hey, I used to send you to your room and now I'm not anymore? How do you tell them that you're changing things up and do it, especially for kids who really don't like being told much of anything? So I love this question. I think it's so great because talking to our kids, as you know, I am so passionate about. And that open communication is a big piece of what makes this method really different from a lot of other approaches. So let's talk about how we talk to our kids about low demand.
Talking to our kids about low demand is tricky, not because talking about low demand is hard, but because we are in the midst of a lot and we are still figuring out what it is that we're doing or how we think about it or how we talk about it. The basics of what I said right at the beginning was, I don't know quite what I'm doing here, but what I do know is that the way that I've been doing it isn't working. And I'm ready for a change. I want to do this differently, and I'm going to need your help to figure it out because we're going to need to do this one together. And they were like, what are you talking about, crazy lady? And I said, I'm not going to force you to do things anymore. The key is using, to the degree that you can, using a shared language. For that, I like to use the language that my kids use. So we use the language of forcing because that was what my kids would say. Hey, you're forcing me. You're forcing me. If your kid says something else, like you're bossing me around, or you're being the mean mama, or you're doing the no, or whatever, then you say, I'm not going to do the no anymore, or I'm not going to be the mean mama as much as I can. I'm really going to try. It's so important to me to do this, and I want to do it differently. And then you tell them, I don't want to do this anymore. But the thing is, I'm really caught in it and I've been doing it a long time. So I'm going to need your help. When I start doing the thing, when I start being the mean mama, when I start forcing, you're going to let me know. And I'm going to know because you don't want to do it, because you say no, because you don't get in the car, because you run to your room. Those are going to be my signs that this isn't working. And I'm going to listen and I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to stop. And then we're going to figure it out together. But for now, I really need your no, and invite their participation through what are probably behaviors that have been harder for the two of you to deal with in the past. Like the no behaviors are often the trickiest ones, but we're going to recast those as our essential indicators. Like, okay, I'm going to listen. I'm going to respond. And then just see what happens for a little while. A lot of things are going to start to fall away. They may be big, they may be little. It doesn't really matter in terms of the communication with your kid. Of course, it matters for figuring out how to do your life around this commitment that you've made. The key for your child is that they aren't going to trust you for a long time that you're serious about this, because why would they? They're going to wait and see what happens. And so it's not like every single time I never forced my kids ever, or I never got it wrong. Like I totally did. And then they did their no. And then I was like, okay, I see your no. That helps. Now I have some more information. Something about this isn't working. I use the language of hard and too hard. Something about this is too hard. We're going to figure out what it is so we can let it go. I think the essential point in communication that I always want to emphasize is that it's ongoing and that it's about the little daily moments. That if you kind of build up this one big talk that you have about low demand or about telling them they're autistic and anything that you want to communicate to them, it's way too much pressure on that one conversation. They're probably not going to absorb it in the first place or really understand what you mean, because you have to start living it out. I would say put less pressure on the conversation and more on what is it that you want to commit to going forward? Like, what does low demand mean to you? And there may be something really concrete that you know you're going to let go of. You might say, you're not going to have a bedtime anymore because it's just driving us absolutely bonkers. We're just fighting with each other all night long and it's definitely not working. You get to put yourself to bed when you want to, and we're going to figure it out. I'm imagining that this is an aligned decision for you to drop that. And then that's your opening into what low demand means. And my kids are still not quite sure what low demand is, and that's fine. The key is to focus on what they receive, not what you are saying. For all of my kids, but especially two of them, had real struggles with receptive language in that season, listening to anyone talk, largely because of school trauma. Like being talked to by an adult was an immediate shutdown, an immediate trauma response. So I could get out 3 words. All the things I just told you, I had to say over a really long period of time simply because I could tell when they glazed over and were no longer with me. But one thing that really grabbed one of my kids' attention was that he hated when I yelled. He called it my big voice, because I'm not actually yelling. It's any kind of deeply emotional communication. So we called it my big voice, because sometimes I would be whispering, but it would still be my big voice, because I was so like, if you don't get down right now, like that's my big voice, right? And so one of our first communications was around, I keep using my big voice and I really don't want to. And I've made a commitment to you that I'm going to stop, but I'm still finding it hard. So what I would love is if you could help me and just tell me when I'm using the big voice by like giving me a signal. And we worked it out. It's like a stop sign hand is the signal of the big voice, because I didn't even always realize I was doing it. And that at least that gave us some back and forth communication. Like I did a thing that crossed his boundaries and he communicated with me non-verbally in a way that said, hey, that's not good. That's not okay. Him helping me identify my problematic behaviors and what they were signals of, and watching me model like, oh, I think I used my big voice because it's dinner time and I seem to always get really stressed at dinner time. I wonder if there's something about dinner time that's too hard for me. I'm going to see if I can let something go, because I don't want to keep doing this. It was a way in to begin this communication flow around the idea of dropping demands and behavior simply as communication, that we weren't going to be talking about behavior anymore beyond what is it telling us about what's too hard and what we need.
For our last question, we're going to get into a space of nuance around listening to our kids, because there can be a point where we're listening too intently, where we are wrapped up in what they're communicating in a way that we lose track of the difference between somebody else and ourselves. And this can be a significant trauma response. If you've been through an incredibly difficult season, it makes total sense that your nervous system gets hyper vigilant and you are zoomed in, like hyper aware of every little thing that your kid is saying or doing, everything that their body is telling you, to the point that you're overwhelmed by it, and that it's difficult for you to tune into your own body and to know what you want. And this can also happen, and I get into this in the question, with our partners or with a parent or caregiver. So it can be because of maybe our own attachment wounds or some patterns in a partnership that we get really wrapped up in what this other person is thinking or feeling or saying. And it's hard for us to know where we stop and somebody else starts. So at the same time as I really, most of this episode is talking about how we attune more closely, how we listen more deeply. But here I want to back up and say that all of that happens with a deep knowledge that we are allowed to protect ourselves. In fact, it's really healthy and good to have a clear differentiation with other people. So let's talk about differentiation and how that plays into the whole question of listening deeply. Casey Davis, who is the struggle care, how to keep house while drowning person, she was talking about how our kids are up and they're down and they're up and they're down. And most of us are tied to our kids. So when they're up, we're up. And when they're down, we're on the roller coaster with them. And that what we want to do is get off the roller coaster so we can be okay while they're not okay. Because this idea, once my kid is okay, then I'll be okay, is very appealing. And it keeps us stuck. It keeps us real stuck. So, yes, I think differentiation is a great word because what it's doing is it's saying, I am a whole separate person. I have all this agency inside of me, all of this freedom, all of this experience that is different than my child. And they are free to be right where they are. And I am over here. Okay. And I'll say I didn't feel that in my body until I started doing trauma work because I am the child of an undifferentiated parent. And so I am very deeply conditioned to read other people to know if I'm safe because I cannot remember a time where that was not true, where I wasn't waking up and looking at her. Are you okay? Are you okay? So then that whole mode just got transferred onto my kid. And I was like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Or my husband, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? And so one of the first differentiations that I did was I stopped looking. It doesn't mean that you're not attuned to your child. You can be attuned and differentiated. Like, oh, I see what's going on for you. Huh. That's interesting. I wonder what I'm going to do about that. Is so different than what are you thinking? What are you needing? What's going on? So sometimes it takes you untangling your own childhood wounds, the things that require, that deserve really skilled psychological care and support for you to learn what it feels like to be safe inside yourself without looking at somebody else to tell you if you're safe. It could be that it means creating a boundary for yourself. So one that I've often shared is that in the early days of dropping screen time demands, it was really dysregulating for my husband. He felt big feelings every time he saw them playing certain games. He would feel sad. He would feel frustrated. He would feel scared. And he was entitled to all those big feelings. It was a big shift for our family. But if I looked at him while he looked at them playing screens, I felt terrible and scared. He was entitled to those big emotions. What I did is I didn't look. I said, if I notice you're looking at them and you're emoting all this stuff, I'm not going to tune in. It wasn't like I don't love you or I'm rejecting you. It was like, I'm going to move my body to another room so that I'm not feeling your feelings because that's too much for me right now. It's hard enough. Like, I know this is the next step we need to take, and I know it's going to take time for you to acclimate to it. I didn't even tell him I was doing that. It was just an internal boundary that I made. I'm not going to tune into your emotions around this. We can process it. There'll be spaces where we can talk, but every single time, that's too much for me. So there may be some differentiation that you make there where you identify a particular trigger and what is within your agency and autonomy to differentiate around that trigger and then take action for yourself. If this podcast is speaking to your soul, you can subscribe through wherever you get your own podcasts. Even better, if you feel the nudge, head on over to Apple Podcasts in particular and leave us a review. It's such a helpful way for new people to also get to experience what this podcast wants to bring into their lives. I'm Amanda. Remember, it takes great strength to let things go. I'll see you next week.